Welcome back to The Price of Business. I'm your host, Kevin Price, talking to you about you and your business. Talking about one of my favorite topics this segment, entrepreneurship in this country, which is in decline. I've been noticing it. I've seen it. Frankly, this economy has largely flatlined since 2008. If you remove the numbers, the statistics regarding economic growth from that Texas contributed since 2008, the United States never even got out of the Great Recession. That's how bad the economy is. In spite of the spin of the media, 90 million people that historically would have been considered, many of whom would have been considered unemployed, have now been taken off as considered permanently no longer looking, because it became futile. We never had this number, neither this number, maybe this percentage back in the Great Depression, but we didn't even have this kind of percentage during the Carter years, and they were bad enough. And so that's basically where we're at. Barack Obama has been the second coming of JC. Unfortunately, it's Jimmy Carter, not the other one. We're going to spend some time with Derek Yonai. He is a economist, and we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on. He's at Florida Southern College, and he's the director of the Center for Free Enterprise. How are you, sir?
Not bad, Kevin. Thanks for having me on the air.
Glad to have you on. Talk a little bit about your background before we get into an article you wrote that the listener can find right now at usdailyreview.com. It's featured there.
Well, as you said, I'm the director of the Center for Free Enterprise here at Florida Southern College. It's brand new. We're only a year and a half old. And the reason I got into this is because what I care about is the same thing the founding father of economics cared about, which is why are some people poor and why are some people rich, and what do we do about poverty? How do we improve other people's lives and make it such that they can pull themselves up and do it with dignity?
Yep, absolutely. And so what happens is that, regardless of what we're talking about, raising minimum wage or a new regulation here and there, all you're doing is creating barriers between businesses and opportunities. And you talk about the decline of entrepreneurship. Good luck finding a community bank. I think most people think all banks were made by mega rich people. The reality is that, putting together a bank of $100 million isn't that profoundly difficult for a group of entrepreneurs. It cannot be done anymore because of Dodd-Frank in this country. And so all we now are doing is dealing with banks that are like DMVs. We are undermining entrepreneurship at every single corner out there. And even institutions that weren't necessarily known for that, like the EPA, have become, essentially muggers of the American dream.
The problem is, everybody talks about entrepreneurship, but in order for that to thrive, it has to have the right environment. And that environment for flourishing and poverty reduction is something called economic freedom. And as you mentioned, it's completely endangered in the United States. Right now, we're poisoning that environment with regulation. And the problem is the writing's on the wall. According to the Gallup poll, we're seeing more business deaths than births. And that's a path to opportunity and income mobility extinction. So if we want to help people, especially the least of us, what we need to do is increase the economic freedom. We need to help protect that environment that enables people to use their creativity to create opportunities for everybody in our society.
Talk a little bit about your credentials. Where did you do your graduate work? Well, give me the whole overview, if you will, academically, just real quickly.
Sure. I probably look like the person who never left college. So I did my PhD in MA up at George Mason.
So you're a Mises guy.
I'm a fan of Mises. I'm a fan of Hayek, but I'm a fan of all good economists who make sense.
Okay.
I also have a JD from Whittier School of Law out in Southern California, and my bachelor's is from UC Irvine.
Okay, you don't have a PhD in economics?
Yes, I do, from Mason.
From Mason, got it. Thank you. So but talk a little bit about that. Are you kind of Austrian in your perspective, or supply side, or you just like to hedge your bets? I mean, you may sound like you want to hedge your bets a little bit.
I'm much more Austrian.
So
I'm a big fan of believing that anything to an extreme is probably not healthy, but I'm very much Austrian in terms of approaching how does society function? How do people with limited knowledge, with all of our frailties and shortcomings, how is it that we're able to come together and transcend that with the grace to be able to produce things like iPods and homes and TVs and movies? When left to our own devices, we can never do that by ourselves. But how could people with different languages, different goals, different backgrounds, different cultures come together peacefully and create this world of just these really great things that we have around us that everybody seems to take for granted.
Wow, I love that. I love that intro. But, the answer is so offensive to our culture today, isn't it? The answer is self-interest.
The answer is self-interest, but the problem is everybody confuses it with just materialism. When we talk about self-interest, what we're talking about is just accomplishing your goals. So if you love your kids, you're being self-interested. If you're hungry and you buy a sandwich, you're being self-interested. If I give $10 to a homeless guy because it makes me feel better and I want to help him out, I'm self-interested. But we forget that. We just think it's about having a bigger TV or a bigger car.
Yeah, no question about it. No question about it. So you're afraid about any kind of extremism. So you haven't got to the point of Rothbard or Mises, who says there is no third way. There's no third way between the market and totalitarianism.
Well, in the extreme and in the abstract, that's probably right. The problem is, if you begin with that, we don't get into the conversation of how do we improve the world where we're at today. I need to improve the world where I'm at today for my kids and my kids' kids and for my students. And for me, that means we have to deal with the world as it is, and how do we nudge ourselves to a better, freer world with more economic freedom, with more prosperity, with more opportunities, where people with great ideas can go out and open up businesses without having to have the government go in there and strangle them to death.
Yeah, I like what you wrote in this article at usatoreview.com. The article is titled Entrepreneurship on the Decline in the U.S. As we make it more difficult for Americans to create opportunities due to these increased regulatory burdens, we snuff out the incentive to create jobs. At a time when the Small Business Administration estimates it costs $10,585 per employee for small businesses just to comply with regulatory laws. I'm assuming that doesn't include any salary.
Like you said, that is just to comply. That is just the time, energy, and effort to make sure you're legal.
Is it any surprise that the entrepreneurial spirit is dying? And of course it's not. And is it any surprise that people like myself, I have a virtual assistant in the Philippines that works for me full time. You wonder why that's the case? I mean, I'd be crazy not to with the current economic environment.
And think about that, right? It provides incentives for us to destroy jobs. And, that's the thing that conservatives and other free market people always get accused of, is all you care about are business people. And if we think about it, entrepreneurship, that really helps the poor. What we want to do is create opportunities for employment. We want to create opportunities where people can live with dignity and have a sense of purpose. But in order to do that, we have to make jobs available and not destroy them. For example, the Congressional Budget Office estimated that if we just increase minimum wage to $10.10, that would destroy 500,000 jobs in the U.S. And some places are already raising it to $15. That's the problem. We want to help people. We want to help poor people, but voters are going about it the wrong way. What we want to do is not destroy jobs and give people who used to have a job zero income. What we want to do is create opportunities for people to be able to move on up, get their foot in the door, and be able to do it with pride and with respect.
Yeah, no question about it. That is the American dream. Someone said, I'm not sure who it was, you can't help America's poor by making America poor. But that seems to be exactly what the leftists are doing that dominate public policy today.
Part of the reason for that is that the people who like markets, like you and I, we don't go out there and advocate poverty reduction. People talk about big business. We talk about how do we help people lower taxes. But at the end of the day, what we gloss over, which makes complete sense for us, is that we see how that helps the poor, but we need to tell people that helps the poor. For example, there's this Z Pizza franchise in Seattle that the franchisee began to freak out after they voted the minimum wage increase, and she's like, I may have to shut down. Those would have been 12 employees at that franchise who could have potentially lost their jobs. That's 12 people who are making minimum wage, who are trying to earn a better living, who would have been thrown out on the street if she decides to close her doors because it's too expensive to hire them all. What we don't see are the people who get hurt by all these increases in minimum wage. What we don't see are the people who get hurt by regulation and the people who end up not making any money at all.
Yeah, so you worked with Gordon Tullock, so you also had a lot of public choice influence as well. And that's really what we're talking about. And I agree with you. The most powerful case for economic freedom is the moral case, not the efficiency case, although both of those can be made, don't you think?
Exactly, because the problem is I'm an economist, which means when I go to a dinner party, people hate me. They say, I hate economics, it's all about efficiency and math. And when I talk to them, I let them understand it's about people. It's about how do we make the world a better place. It's the moral argument of how do we do this without engaging in theft? How do we do it without violating other people's rights? And how do we do it where you can control your life? And that argument is highly persuasive, but we just don't do enough of that.
Yeah, no question about that as well. And that's where you're going to win hearts and minds. It's interesting because when you look at the various economic schools, most of them very quickly adapted to the whole mathematic equation. The Austrian school didn't do that until the 20th century. And really, if you talk to serious PhDs, Peter Betke is a friend of mine. He's been on my program, for example, that are in the Austrian school. And they said, you know what, they mainly did it to legitimize the Austrian school. It wasn't because they believed it would make it more effective, but in order to make it more legitimate in the academic circles.
And that's been unfortunate because I have a chapter coming out in a book that's supposed to be published next year. And my big argument there is economists need to be like romantic poets. The poet is there to describe how science affects the human soul and affects our human activity in our lives. And that, to me, is the role of the economist. We have to take the science of economics and explain it to people in a way that moves them, that helps them understand, yeah, freedom's great. Freedom gives me the opportunity to use my creativity, and I benefit other people. And I benefit them so much, they pay me for it. And then I can hire other people who didn't have jobs before and create opportunity upon opportunity. But you can't convince people of that argument if all you do is show these really random statistics and talk about math. Got to get back to what people care about, which is other people. That economics, markets, and business, it's all inherently social. It's all about these relationships we have with other people. And that's something Austrians have done very well, and something, quite frankly, economics needs to get back to.
Human nature, just like Mises talked about. It's all about human nature. In fact, you probably can garner more from psychology than you can from most economic textbooks when it comes to why we are the way we are, what's happening today.
Right. What we have to do is look at what do people care about, what's moving people. And right now, we have a lot of uncertainty, we have a lot of fear. And instead of embracing it and saying, well, how do we fix it? How do we make it better? How do we overcome these obstacles? We've been socialized, if you will, to ask, well, what's government going to do to fix it for us? And we've turned ourselves into children as opposed to these dignified human beings who have created wonderful things. I mean, if you think about everything around us, some human being came up with the idea for that and then made our lives better and created jobs out of that. That's something that we can't ever forget, that it's about people and how do we improve those lives and reduce poverty.
And it's almost always done in spite of government, not because of government. It's done, if government had its way, these things would never be able to happen. It's just really quite sad if you get down to it. Derek Yonai, I want you to read his article over there at usdailyreview.com. It's featured there today. He's with the Center for Free Enterprise at Florida Southern College. And the website, best website before I let you go.
Well, let me give you your listeners a website. If they want to learn more about economic freedom, the best website is www.economicfreedom.org.
Very good. We'll check that out. I appreciate it. Appreciate it very much. By the way, today's show brought to you in part by Veely Law Firm and Quarterstone Academy. More for you after this on The Price of Business.